This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for August 20th, 6 p.m. Back in 1964, we were watching a system developing in the mid-Atlantic well east of the Windward Islands, and this would eventually become a major hurricane and move through the northern Leeward Islands and clipped southwestern Haiti and came close to Jamaica, hit Cuba near Manzanillo as a major hurricane, and then moved into South Florida as a Category 2 hurricane, and then inland and back out to sea and redeveloped as a Category 1 hurricane and went harmlessly out to sea, but not before it did a lot of damage in South Florida, Cuba, and the Caribbean islands. But this is the time of the year where we see these Cape Verde systems come across, and they can wreak a lot of damage between now and the second week of September. So we're going to be watching for this closely. Now, there is a system out there, 95L, that is south of the Cape Verde Islands, and none of the models right now are indicating a track like this, but that could change down the road. But more than likely, the current track of what happened last year at this time, Hurricane Bill, is more than likely with this system. And here's what Bill did. It developed around the 18th, moved off to the west-northwest, became a major hurricane. I remember the models were indicating this was going to try to recurve a little bit further to the east out in here somewhere, but Bill was pretty persistent, went more to the west-northwest, split the uprights between Bermuda and the Outer Banks, and hit Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as a Category 1 hurricane. So Bill did give some people some fits with the forecast track, and that could happen with this system, and I'll get to the details on it in just a minute. But Hurricane Bill, keep this track in mind for Invest 95L. All right, here is Invest 95L south of the Cape Verde Islands. You'll notice here we have banding. Some inflow here. There's a definite rotation here, several hundred miles south of the Cape Verde Islands, and the system is cruising off to the west primarily right now, and then it'll eventually go west-northwest based on the steering flow. And here is the current position of the system, basically moving due west. This is the close-up of the Hurricane City model map, map of Invest 95L moving due west, and again it'll eventually move more to the west-northwest as time goes by. Now here is a water vapor loop of the East Atlantic. Actually, not the loop. This is a still image. And here is our Invest 95L. But what's right out northwest of this system is a big streak of dry air here. And these systems do not like dry air around them, as what systems have to build up in the atmosphere like this. And you can see it to the south side of the circulation, but on the north side it's being choked off a little bit by this dry air. And some of the models are indicating that in the short term, it's not going to develop very much, but in about 36 to 48 hours, things are going to get cranking up. I'll show you an intensity graphic here from Tropical Atlantic in just a minute. But if this dry air stays in tandem with this wave, it will be slow to develop because systems need a lot of moisture to rise up into the atmosphere, and right now that dry air might choke it off just a little bit. All right, here are the models early on the system. And the green model here is the GFDL model, and this is indicating it'll get up to Category 2 status and actually flirt with major hurricane status here when it gets around 50 degrees west. So we'll see if that happens. The BAM model, the GFS, and the Canadian model keep it a little bit weaker, moving generally off to the west-northwest. So generally, that's the consensus. When the models are tightly clustered like this, is a pretty good indication that that is definitely what's going to happen several days out from now. And of course, a lot depends on where the center actually ends up developing, where the center of circulation is with the tropical depression, and then the models will shift accordingly. But interestingly, not the GFDL, the European model, the ECMWF model, the past several days has been showing this kind of a track and then eventually recurving out in the open Atlantic east of Bermuda. But on the last run, this afternoon, they have this system moving west-northwest, northwest, and then coming to an abrupt halt and heading back to the west again. So that may be an early indication that maybe that trough that's forecast to come off the east coast and send this out to sea might not happen, and this might get shoved back toward the west, maybe as a weaker system. So we'll have to wait and see. There might be some shear out in here when it gets up here, and it might change directions due to a new ridge of high pressure building up in here. You know, back in, not to even indicate that this, like an Andrew situation could happen, but back in 1992, Andrew formed around the 16th of August, moved west-northwest. Models indicated it was going to recurve out to sea. A trough was coming off the U.S. It sheared Andrew to pieces, But Andrew survived, moved back to the west, found itself under a ridge of high pressure, and strengthened rapidly as it headed towards the Bahamas and Florida. So that is a possibility. It's not, we're not going to write off that chance at all, but most models right now indicate a system that will head out into the open Atlantic. But that European model, we got to watch that closely because it's trending more west than it was a day or two ago. All right, here is the East Atlantic AVN shot, and again, you can see Invest 95L right here south of the Cape Verde Islands. Now we have another one, another wave that the models really aren't gravitating, showing much development with this, but this is going to move out over the next several days in the Atlantic, and I think by midweek we could see some development out of this as well, even though the models aren't showing it. And then there's another wave back in here. So this is the Cape Verde season, folks. This is when it all starts to happen between now and the second week of September. So we're going to watch this closely to see if all these waves develop. Here's the steering flow from Sims, and you can see that we have a ridge of high pressure around 1020, 1022 millibars up in here, and that's really not scheduled or forecast to move very much over the next several days. So this should follow a path similar to this and then find the weakness up here. And that's when everything changes. There's going to be a trough, an area of low pressure up here in the North Atlantic. That'll break the ridge down, allow a weakness up here and reach curve out to sea. But if that weakness dissipates quicker than expected or does not break the ridge down, the ridge breaks, builds back in. We might have a high pressure ridge build over Bermuda. That sends things back toward the United States, so we're going to have to watch that closely. You got to look for model trends. That's where the best indicators for where a storm is going to go is looking for trends in models. So far, the European is beginning to shift back to the west, so we need to watch that closely. All right, here's Chris's Tropical Atlantic showing the intensity forecast for these models. By the way, Chris is running a new program on 95L at tropicalatlantic.com that's actually showing the best performing models in intensity and direction. We're not quite using those yet until this system gets better organized, and then we'll start focusing on those and once the data becomes more reliable. But here are the early intensity models, and you'll notice here the ship model here takes it up to Category 2 status in about 5 days. But what's interesting about this is in 24 hours they have this as a minimal tropical storm here, 40 miles an hour, 40 knots rather, and then we have this up to 65 knots within 24 hours after that, which is rapid intensification. And during the off season, there's been some tweaks to the ship model, and what it does, it focuses more on the dry air within a circulation and focuses on the adjustments for rapid intensification within a 24-hour period. And they said that they're going to implement that at the height of the hurricane season, which I'm assuming is probably right around this time for the next several weeks anyway, that they'll be implementing this process. And the ship model here takes this up to Category 2 status. So we'll see if the adjustments they made to the model are correct. And then it levels out here due to that dry air and shear that I talked about a little earlier. So anyway, we'll keep track of this system. Long time to watch this. Again, make sure you have your supplies ready now. Now is the time to do it. The rest of the basin's pretty quiet. We'll focus on 95L. I'll be back with another update in a day or two. We'll see how this progresses. Again, check out HurricaneCity.com for the latest information on Invest 95L. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.